Happy Pride, everyone. We are continuing to celebrate those in our community who have been using whatever they have to amplify, to push, and to uplift our community. And right now, today, I have with me a fabulous, talented, powerful Black trans man. Welcome to Now, Sasha Alexander.
Oh, thank you, my love. Appreciate
Thank
you.
you.
Happy to be here.
It's so good to see you again. You know, it seems like we like ships that pass in the night that just get to see each other every once in a while when we come together for these things. But I am just so proud of you.
Thank you, my love. I mean, I'm proud of you. You're out here, doing the thing.
Thank you so much. You know, and I know you know how important it is for us to create our own spaces. I mean, first of all, we're sitting in this beautiful space provided by a Black trans organization.
Absolutely.
And I know that you know, as a founder in Black trans media,
Mhm.
like, how do you see storytelling starting to shape the future of trans visibility and representation?
Oh, okay. Might have to make you go back to that question because it was such a good question. And I just want
Yes,
to
yeah.
start off by thanking you for
Yeah.
having me here and for everything you do because the landscape looks very different than it did over a decade ago when I started Black Trans Media. And it's because of people like you who have been out there and never stopped telling stories and pushing people around the stories, and both as trans people and as Black people. And that's
Yes.
really at the root of like the work that I do because a lot of people think that it's about trans representation, which it is, but as Black trans people, it's also about racial justice and it's about racism. And
Absolutely.
it's really easy for people to feel like this is about transphobia, but if it's about transphobia, it's also about white supremacy, right?
Ooh.
So,
Oh, okay, y'all. I just need y'all to prepare. The people who are watching and listening, you about to learn today. We're gonna learn a few things today,
no, I'm happy to
baby.
be
You
here.
are breaking it down, and you're right. So, like, thank you so much, first of all, for just acknowledging, the work that we do. I think that, in our community, we have to do a better job at acknowledging each other, at uplifting
Absolutely.
each other, so thank you so much for that.
Absolutely.
But again, like as I was saying, like, finally, we are getting the means
Sure.
or making the means
Yes.
to create our own platforms and to tell our own stories. So how do you see that, us being in control of that, starting to shape the future of trans representation and
Oh yeah,
visibility?
absolutely. Because we're not being given it or getting it. Like we're reclaiming it and we're taking it and we're making it and we're creating it and we're building it. I was just saying to Jordan, because we're in this beautiful space, like it was years and years ago that we were at Black Trans Media's opening of our space in Bed-Stuy when we opened up a space for Black
Wow.
trans people.
Yeah.
And she was there. And then I said, now we're here and your space has been here over 5 years. I mean, like it's incredible that
Wow.
spaces led by and for Black trans people, like these are some of the only spaces in the world, like, I don't think people understand that. Like, spaces that Black trans people autonomously created for themselves, not somebody over us doing it, that's not something that existed a decade ago. There were not spaces like this. Maybe in our homes, if we had them,
Mm-hmm.
or in spaces, other nonprofits that we worked at, where we tried to squeeze in little bits of our identities, but we were not kind of given permission. We were not kind of fully taking up the space we deserve to as Black trans people because of that anti Blackness, because of that transphobia. And so I think it's a really unique time to be at now where there's like these waves of kind of like Black trans renaissance that have happened for artists, for cultural workers, for organizers, for healers. And even though it's a very repressive time,
Sure, sure.
that's also when we turn the dial up too, in the work that we're doing. And so I think it's just like an incredible time. I was just last month at the Black Trans Short Film Festival in Durham, North Carolina,
Wow.
that Comfrey Films does.
Wow.
They're a Black trans production house in the South. Incredible. I saw your film with Brian Michael Smith.
It's funny because I ain't seen it yet.
Oh,
I'm
oh,
gonna reach out to
oh,
somebody. I
hold
ain't
on.
seen it
Reach
yet.
out
But
to
so
him.
how was
Right.
it?
Oh, that film was
It
fire.
was fire, right?
Beautiful
It
film.
was such a fun film to work on.
It's so nuanced to see. So, like 10 years
And
ago,
leading with a Black trans man.
well, leading with a Black trans man, the story is really unique. I mean, both of you as leads together is nuts.
We
I
need
mean,
we need more of that, right?
yeah,
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 it's
yeah.
really, really good. But it's not the kind of story. 10 years ago, we were just getting these stories about violence. They were told about us. They were told through a framework, like there was no understanding of anti-Blackness and how the stories about Black trans people, particularly Black trans women, right? We're so nuanced, but like it was just this sensation on the violence and the
Mm-hmm.
harm, and no material support,
Mm-hmm.
or support for us to tell our own stories. And so I feel like it's such a different time where we are telling our own stories. We have created our own platforms,
Yes, we have.
and they're working.
Yes, they
We've
are.
built things to weather through a storm, and when we're in the storm, we can't forget these things are here for us.
Well, talk about that storm just a little bit, in the
Yeah,
sense of, because I know firsthand, but I want to know more about your experience in creating something that wasn't there
sure.
and not always having the support, to do this work. How talk to me about the challenge, because here's the situation. No opportunity wasted
Sure.
is all about how people find the opportunity, not waste the opportunity, and
Mhm.
find the challenges that happen, because these challenges, on the other side of challenge, is knowledge,
Absolutely.
experience, strength, and all these things.
Yes.
But the process builds that up for you. So tell me a little bit about the process of building your Black transmedia landscape.
Yeah, no, we call it a galaxy because it has
Yeah.
been building a Black trans world. And well, so this was over a decade ago in 2013. I had been teaching filmmaking to youth, LGBT youth, in like organizing spaces, direct service
Wow.
nonprofit spaces, but never a space just for Black trans people. And often that's because like the programs weren't specific to Black youth or Black trans youth. There was no need, maybe people saw, for that. And it was hard as somebody working in nonprofits to like say there was a need for that. And I realized at some point nobody was going to give me permission to do what I just needed to do. I needed to give myself permission. And if I saw there was something missing, I think it's Maya Angelou or Toni Morrison who's like, you have to write the story that
Yes,
you want to read, right?
absolutely. Yes.
I'm like, well, where is this story? It's not out there, and I want this story. And it's like, well, I have to go and I have to do that. And in some ways, I didn't want that on me. I mean, but we don't kind of choose our instructions,
You
as I say,
just are
right?
obedient.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Just I'm in service to myself and my
Mhm.
vision and the people. And it made sense after organizing for so long. I come from like a youth organizing background, from like making media and arts, like not formal background, but like picking up a camera, making music, telling
That's how some of the
stories.
most greatest storytellers,
Yeah,
directors have started, not through class or, having
yeah.
access to that, but by picking up a camera.
Yeah, but I realized, what would it be like to take the same things I get to do for other people in these programs and do it just for Black trans people,
Mm.
And I was like, and why is it that nobody else sees any value in this? Except as we started to hold space, like people were like, this is incredible. Black trans people who had been holding space at other nonprofits for years or decades, but couldn't hold space as Black trans people, I
Hmm.
think felt more and more permission to just be like, we have every right to center ourselves and our identity. And I would be remiss to not name Isla Nettles, who was like, for me in the moment when this happened, the catalyst of why I started Black Transmedia in the moment. And this is now going on almost 12 years ago.
Hmm.
She was a young Black trans woman in Harlem, and I was working at the Maisels Documentary Center, which is also in Harlem, and only blocks away from the police precinct that she was like across from when she was, beaten to death and killed essentially. And she was a young Black trans woman, and the media like really sensationalized the story about what happened to her, and then quickly like you heard from everybody who wasn't a Black trans person about it, and
Exactly.
all these people were rallying, and you kind of felt like we didn't have like any like political like base as Black trans people. We had all these nonprofits that existed and things, but because of the anti-Blackness and the racism, there were very few Black people who actually had any like power
Power.
that they could do something.
Absolutely.
And
They
even
were in
if they
outreach.
did,
They weren't in the management director level
and if they
positions.
did, they got there because they didn't do stuff specifically for Black trans people, right?
True.
And they
Very
didn't,
true.
and so it just felt like a moment that it was really important that we like stop just being the subject of some story and like that we're the author of the story.
So saying that, to follow up on that, then what is the role that then, as you've created this platform and, really the space for Black trans media, where do you see the role of media excuse me, where do you see the role of media playing in sort of combating these harmful stereotypes and
Oh yeah.
misinformation?
Oh, absolutely. Media has always been like an organizing tool to me. So obviously media like for personal empowerment, to like for ourselves when we're dealing with that stigma, like I was just talking to somebody about suicidality, you know, and that's always been something that our communities have been plagued by, not just LGBT people or trans people, but Black
Black
people and
people,
communities of color, right?
absolutely.
And that there's a lot of stigma. So, yeah, so I see media as an empowerment tool. I see media as an organizing tool. I see media as a way for us to educate people in our communities. And I see media as a way for us to have a legacy, because we're also not going to be here forever to do this work. And we shouldn't just have to be here forever doing this
Hmm.
work.
Hmm.
So I see it as a strategy, you know, for us to be able to both express ourselves and create and tell the kind of stories that we need to, but also a way to like take care of ourselves and heal ourselves and find our way. And you
Absolutely.
know, in documentary filmmaking, where I taught for a long time, they always say when you have a question to something, your film is the answer to it, you know, or you use your film to answer it.
Hmm.
And I feel
Hmm.
that same way about media, you know, like I created Black trans media because there weren't enough Black trans people being represented in the media in a way that felt like was authentically ours. And that was more than a decade ago. And I really actually, even though racism and transphobia are ancient issues.
I feel like, I don't know if you feel the same way, but I feel like media has made conversations more accessible.
Mm,
Because, I feel like there's a little elitism when it comes to people saying you're not really reading books if you're doing
mm,
audiobooks. And I'm like, well, girls, I'm a smart girl and I have read a lot of audiobooks. I have
sure,
a huge audiobook library, but also even when we talk about like with trans tech, we have brought video tutorial trainings to folks because
sure,
sometimes being able to sit with media,
sure,
play it at your own speed, go
absolutely.
back. So how have you seen your media become and Black trans media become more accessible both to Black trans people, but to those who call themselves our allies and family?
Well, in some ways, I would say, at least in terms of Black trans media, we don't really seek to make it accessible to those people. We really just seek to make it accessible for Black trans people.
Amen.
And that is at the center of what we care to do. We do understand that we're situated in a world where all those other people do have a big impact on how we live our lives. So we don't not want a strategy where we're thinking about how to bring them in. But I think I found in the last, you know, decade that like by centering on the communities that I most want to make an impact and not always trying to outsource things to these other communities, that like really we can build a lot of power. Like there
Hmm.
already is a lot of power. And then in some way we kind of have everything we need. It's just
I
being
believe,
strategic about
yeah,
how to do that.
I believe that. So, okay, with being strategic and figuring out how to do that, with technology, and people have phones in their hands with
Sure.
4K cameras.
Sure.
What advice would you give to other Black trans people who want to create their platforms and tell their stories?
Wow. I mean, I would tell them to do it and not to overthink it and not to think that there isn't value and worth to make it, and to collaborate also as a way to hold yourself accountable and not do it on your own. But I would say to make it, to tell it, to do it, whatever it is, any art that you love, that any of us grew up listening to something, somebody had to believe in themselves enough to make that song that you love to listen to, or it wouldn't exist. The
Hmm.
world just wouldn't be the world without art, you know, and culture. So I feel like absolutely make what you're feeling called to make. It's like it was given to you for a reason, and you're designed and supposed to make it.
So, Sasha, there is a lot of misinformation, like we talked about before, but not just misinformation, confusion.
Sure.
And, I'm really starting to recognize that it's not just people outside of our community, but it's actually people within our community too. And I understand with patriarchy and all those other things why there's been such a hyper focus on trans femme and trans femme
Hmm.
bodies. But how do we restore balance so that both, cis het folks like Jess Hilarious, who are embarrassing themselves by saying only women can have babies, but then you got people from our own communities joining in on the conversation who are just as lost. So how do we balance having people understand that trans men exist?
Well, I'm here, and we definitely exist. There's a lot of us. I mean, I think this gets back to what you talked about with stigma and with media. And I think when you look at the history of media and the way, particularly that trans people are talked about, there's like been a hyper focus on trans women and trans women's narratives. And that's not been a positive necessarily thing for trans women at all, right? Except that people are aware that trans women exist, even if it's not a good thing that they think about trans women. They just still have an understanding that there's a reality of trans women. Whereas I do feel with trans men or trans masculine people, there's less of an understanding that we exist and we're
Well,
out here the
especially
same
since
way.
once they were doing this whole bathroom thing, once they started
Oh
realizing
gosh.
that they wanted you
Well,
to go
well,
into a women's
well,
bathroom.
sure. Yeah, and which a lot of trans masculine people and trans men were like, if we started to do that, which some of us could for whatever reason, like that would make other people feel uncomfortable, right?
Very
I would feel
uncomfortable.
uncomfortable, but it would make women feel uncomfortable. And I think there's a lot of nuances
But
that
isn't that
people
who
just
we're
don't
supposed to be
understand.
protecting?
Well, exactly. And the reality is, if you have gendered bathrooms, right? If I want to go attack women, all I know is there's a bunch of women in the one that's designated women. So if I really want to harm women, there's nothing stopping me from going into a space designated for women to go harm them. You know what I mean? Like, and the other thing I say about bathrooms is like in everybody's home or place that they grew up, you have a bathroom and people of all genders usually use that bathroom. In your home bathroom, it's not like designated male or female or anything like that. So the fact that people don't have any kind of nuanced understanding about a bathroom is kind of bonkers, except we live in the US where we had black and white bathrooms. So I know people sometimes are like, well, these are very different issues. But as a black trans person, I'm like, actually, it's not that different of an issue when you feel like based on part of your identity, people would want you to use create a whole other place for you to be because
So,
you're not supposed to be there.
so we're talking about things that are real life experiences that have turned into politics.
For sure.
And so, how do you balance like the challenge of media production and the responsibility of advocating for marginalized communities? Because
Sure.
sometimes, people know there seems to like have a cost or pushback or something when you speak up with these things and you're also trying to run a media production
Well,
space.
sure. Well, everything is political to me, right? And when people are like, well, I'm not doing this thing politically, I'm like, well, that's a choice. You're actually making a choice. And you're saying it's not political, which is a political choice to try to declare
Absolutely.
it not that.
Yes.
And then you got to actually look at like, what are the values and the frameworks that are actually informing that thing that you're creating? Is it actually being upheld by white supremacy or is it actually accessible to people, right? Like there are all sorts of, I think, ways that we're challenging a lot of that in the media that we're making, but we're also seeing pushback against all of the progress. And I think it's important people understand historically that's not new in this country
Right.
or anywhere, that when people make change and make societal change, that there is a repressive backlash to that. After slavery, like post slavery, there was a repressive backlash to freedom, right? And I mean, after the civil rights movement, we got prison industrial complex, we got all sorts of things, right? So I just feel like, likewise, trans people making all the progress we were making and have been making, we weren't not going to see things like this,
Right.
happen. And I feel like
Thank you for that reminder.
yeah,
Yes.
and I feel like it's my job as a trans person, as a trans masculine person, right, to be visible about those things that are happening and to talk about that change in a way that isn't act like it's not something new, that we need this or that people are going through these oppressive, systems and experiences,
Yeah. Speaking of not being new, pride
Oh,
has been around for a
oh,
long time. And, it started out as a riot, started
sure.
there. But it has become this corporate situation. But
Sure.
they didn't goop the girls because they didn't start to pull the corporate sponsorships back.
Sure.
As a black trans man, I know as a black trans woman, I haven't necessarily felt like pride is that corporate pride anyway, that's my
Sure.
event. I have to find and carve my own spaces with community.
Sure.
We've had some progress where some people are learning, but now we still have people who are trying to separate the T from LGBTQ plus IA. I see, I almost forgot a couple. So how do you see the trajectory of
Mm,
pride in
mm.
including trans people? And are there still these gaps? And how do we fill those gaps into making sure that pride is something for all of us?
Oh, that's such a good question. And I mean, we're here in New York City where it's like, historically people act like Pride started, but obviously there were Compton cafeteria riots, happened 3 years before Stonewall. Dewey's lunch counter sit-in in Philadelphia happened 10 years before that in Philadelphia and the civil rights movement. Like there have been actions and a lot of those did involve police violence. So like I think it's also important people don't forget that history, that like Stonewall was a 3-day like riot, rebellion, whatever you want to call it, that was initiated by laws that were like designating how trans people were supposed to dress. You had to legally have like 3 articles of clothing that
Yep.
were like male or female. I
Yep.
would be arrested right now for what I'm wearing, right? If a law
Mhm.
like that existed.
I would
And
just be arrested for looking too hot.
well,
I'm
yes.
sorry.
Well, both.
Sorry,
Yes, yes,
officer.
yes.
Mhm.
But I think I feel like there's this narrative where people have been able to be like, trans women of color started the revolution, the riot, Stonewall, which is important because Marsha was there, Sylvia was there. There are other women that were there that are
Absolutely,
actually less
yes.
known, but there were also trans masculine people
Stormy,
there.
yeah, yeah.
Stormy was there. And there are other people I feel like in the movement who have held it down for decades. And I feel like the narrative, it's just like what happens with narratives, that they
Did you
become very
see that the
mainstream.
Stonewall Inn posted like an AI video of what it would look like if we had phones back when the Stonewall riots happened?
Oh Lord.
The worst use of AI.
I
And
mean,
why?
we're using AI to see what like a cat looks like making fries at McDonald's. So I mean, and that takes like 10 bottles of water just to do that. So like I'm not really sure what we're doing anything productive with that technology, especially as queer and trans people, the kind of things that you could be doing with that technology or any technology, kind of bonkers.
Absolutely.
But I feel like that history gets lost. Here in this city, Heritage of Pride, which organizes the big, we still call it gay pride, which is so offensive to all the trans people. And I can't stand when people are like, how's your gay pride? And I'm like, I don't know what you've been talking about. But Heritage of Pride for a long time was a target of Fierce, which was an LGBTQ youth organization that was like fighting to make sure that when we were down on the piers or anywhere as LGBTQ youth or people, that like police violence, gentrification, all these issues, organizations like that are not even out here the same way doing what they're doing because the mainstream narrative, like we've been accepted and people feel like, well, we don't need to like have this radical stance about these things. But Black Trans Media and my work, we've been working with Reclaim Pride for years to have a counter protest, counter march to Pride. And other
Wow.
cities all over the world also do that
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they
Yes.
recognize no
True.
cops, no corporations. Like, we don't want to be part of that. And the first Pride was in 1971 here in New York City. They marched to like the women's jail that was here in the city. And it's very political.
Right. There was like
The
an
roots of
action
Pride
at
are
the end of
very
the
political.
march.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. And it's like now those things are lost so that there's like a Goya float with a rainbow on it. Like, which is important, I guess, culturally in some ways, that we're like, yo, that's a big deal in some ways for our cultures to like see these things, but tangibly not if like the shelter system's filled with, Black and brown trans people who are being mistreated, in a city when all this money comes in. None of that's going there. None of that's going to the food insecurity that people have. None of that's going to the economic relief anybody needs. So like Pride, like,
What is there to be proud of?
yeah, and it's not to be proud of
I mean,
that,
and I
you
listen,
know?
because I always say this, like, sure, there's pride in our identity,
Sure.
but can we really take pride in how we stand up for each other and treat each other when marriage equality passed and so many things went silent, you
Well,
know?
yeah. And can we be proud of a history of resistance that we have, that if we're going to get out there, which it is a big deal just to leave your neighborhood and go somewhere as you are every day. Like, people get harassed every day, even in New York City, that's supposed to be such a friendly city. Queer and trans people like are not safe here either.
True.
So just going somewhere and celebrating is a big deal. It's not that
Absolutely.
it's not, but it's like at this point in a city that's like historically part of like the movement and the history of LGBTQ people, it's just a fail, which obviously we got a mayor that's not gonna help us get there, or a lot of other people in power who aren't. But there's a history of resistance in this city, culturally in this city. Like, it's incredible,
Yes.
and a lot of that gets lost to this like corporate idea of pride. But in your neighborhood, like where queer and trans people live every day, in prisons and jails and shelters, like queer and trans people are surviving. And that's what we should like be pouring money into and have pride over,
Absolutely.
like how we're surviving,
Absolutely.
even, with everything that we're up against.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So those are the stories that like I feel committed to telling the communities, that I come from in our work. And I feel really, I'm happy that we can be here talking about that, because pride also it feels hard when this month comes, because everybody's going to overwork and be underpaid.
Brother, you have dropped some gems, some knowledge, some love in this podcast. And I just want to thank you for not only what you brought here now into this opportunity, but how you've taken advantage of every single opportunity, because I know it's not easy. It's not always easy to see the opportunity, let alone to be able to harness that opportunity and make something out of it for yourself and for your community. So many people right now are having an individualized experience, And I get it, everybody's on their own thing at their own time. But thank you for not just focusing on, a pathway for yourself, but creating a pathway for our community to also, access this media space.
Well, Ashe, I would say thank you, but I'm a reflection of you as well, my sister, because you have absolutely done that for our community. So I am thrilled to be part of a community where we get to do that for our people.
Well, thank you. Well, happy Pride.
Happy Pride to you, and I'll say Black trans love all days, always.
All days, always. I love that. We will be right back.